Yesterday is not ours to recover, but tomorrow is ours to win or lose. Peace is a journey of 1,000 miles, and it must be taken one step at a time. The noblest search is the search for excellence. The guns and the bombs, the rockets and the warships, are all symbols of human failure. Being president is like being a jackass in a hailstorm. There's nothing to do but to stand there and take it. You might say that Lyndon Johnson is a cross between a Baptist preacher and a cowboy. I once told Nixon that the presidency is like being a jackass caught in a hailstorm. You've got to just stand there and take it. There are no problems we cannot solve together, and very few that we can solve by ourselves. The vote is the most powerful instrument ever devised by man for breaking down injustice and destroying the terrible walls which imprison men because they are different from other men. We live in a world that has narrowed into a neighborhood before it has broadened into a brotherhood. When the burdens of the presidency seem unusually heavy, I always remind myself it could be worse. I could be a mayor. If one morning I walked on top of the water across the Potomac River, the headline that afternoon would read, "President Can't Swim." Our purpose in Vietnam is to prevent the success of aggression. It is not conquest, it is not empire, it is not foreign bases, it is not domination. It is, simply put, just to prevent the forceful conquest of South Vietnam by North Vietnam. I have learned that only two things are necessary to keep one's wife happy. First, let her think she's having her own way. And second, let her have it. If future generations are to remember us more with gratitude than sorrow, we must achieve more than just the miracles of technology. We must also leave them a glimpse of the world as it was created, not just as it looked when we got through with it. Jerry Ford is so dumb he can't fart and chew gum at the same time. A president's hardest task is not to do what is right, but to know what is right. We have talked long enough in this country about equal rights. It is time now to write the next chapter, and to write it in the books of law. I will do my best. That is all I can do. I ask for your help, and God's. Doing what's right isn't the problem. It is knowing what's right. The presidency has made every man who occupied it, no matter how small, bigger than he was, and no matter how big, not big enough for its demands. Every man has a right to a Saturday night bath. There are plenty of recommendations on how to get out of trouble cheaply and fast. Most of them come down to this: deny your responsibility. The atomic bomb certainly is the most powerful of all weapons, but it is conclusively powerful and effective only in the hands of the nation which controls the sky. Our numbers have increased in Vietnam because the aggression of others has increased in Vietnam. There is not, and there will not be, a mindless escalation. The separation of church and state is a source of strength, but the conscience of our nation does not call for separation between men of state and faith in the Supreme Being. I want to make a policy statement. I am unabashedly in favor of women. John F. Kennedy was the victim of the hate that was a part of our country. It is a disease that occupies the minds of the few but brings danger to the many. What we won when all of our people united must not be lost in suspicion and distrust and selfishness and politics. Accordingly, I shall not seek, and I will not accept, the nomination of my party for another term as president. We have entered an age in which education is not just a luxury permitting some men an advantage over others. It has become a necessity without which a person is defenseless in this complex, industrialized society. We have truly entered the century of the educated man. We must open the doors of opportunity. But we must also equip our people to walk through those doors. Until justice is blind to color, until education is unaware of race, until opportunity is unconcerned with the color of men's skins, emancipation will be a proclamation but not a fact. The Russians feared Ike. They didn't fear me. When I was a boy, we didn't wake up with Vietnam and have Cyprus for lunch and the Congo for dinner. To conclude that women are unfitted to the task of our historic society seems to me the equivalent of closing male eyes to female facts. The CIA is made up of boys whose families sent them to Princeton but wouldn't let them into the family brokerage business. I believe we can continue the great society while we fight in Vietnam. While you're saving your face, you're losing your ass. You do not examine legislation in the light of the benefits it will convey if properly administered, but in the light of the wrongs it would do and the harms it would cause if improperly administered. I'd rather give my life than be afraid to give it. The fact that a man is a newspaper reporter is evidence of some flaw of character. I don't believe I'll ever get credit for anything I do in foreign affairs, no matter how successful it is, because I didn't go to Harvard. If the American people don't love me, their descendants will. I feel like I just grabbed a big juicy worm with a right sharp hook in the middle of it. Poverty must not be a bar to learning, and learning must offer an escape from poverty. We are not about to send American boys 9 or 10,000 miles away from home to do what Asian boys ought to be doing for themselves. We have the opportunity to move not only toward the rich society and the powerful society, but upward to the great society. I seldom think of politics more than 18 hours a day. The men who have guided the destiny of the United States have found the strength for their tasks by going to their knees. This private unity of public men and their God is an enduring source of reassurance for the people of America. A man without a vote is man without protection. I am a freeman, an American, a United States Senator, and a Democrat, in that order. In our home there was always prayer, aloud, proud and unapologetic. The last thing I wanted to do was to be a wartime president. Just like the Alamo, somebody damn well needed to go to their aid. Well, by God, I'm going to Vietnam's aid. Presidents quickly realize that while a single act might destroy the world they live in, no one single decision can make life suddenly better or can turn history around for the good. I am concerned about the whole man. I am concerned about what the people, using their government as an instrument and a tool, can do toward building the whole man, which will mean a better society and a better world. There is but one way for a president to deal with Congress, and that is continuously, incessantly, and without interruption. If it is really going to work, the relationship has got to be almost incestuous. Education is not a problem. Education is an opportunity. What convinces is conviction. Believe in the argument you're advancing. If you don't, you're as good as dead. The other person will sense that something isn't there, and no chain of reasoning, no matter how logical or elegant or brilliant, will win your case for you. Our most tragic error may have been our inability to establish a rapport and a confidence with the press and television, with the communication media. I don't think the press has understood me. This is not Johnson's war. This is America's war. If I drop dead tomorrow, this war will still be with you. Greater love hath no man than to attend the Episcopal Church with his wife. No member of our generation who wasn't a communist or a dropout in the 30s is worth a damn. There are no favorites in my office. I treat them all with the same general inconsideration. A man can take a little bourbon without getting drunk, but if you hold his mouth open and pour in a quart, he's going to get sick on it. If two men agree on everything, you may be sure that one of them is doing the thinking. We did not choose to be the guardians of the gate, but there is no one else. I'm tired. I'm tired of feeling rejected by the American people. I'm tired of waking up in the middle of the night worrying about the war. It may be, it just may be, that life as we know it with its humanity is more unique than many have thought. This administration here and now declares unconditional war on poverty. When I was young, poverty was so common that we didn't know it had a name. Whether we are New Dealer, Old Dealer, Liberty Leaguer or Red, whether we agree or not, we still have the right to think and speak how we feel. Whoever won't fight when the president calls him, deserves to be kicked back in his hole and kept there. Only two things are necessary to keep one's wife happy. One is to let her think she is having her own way, and the other is to let her have it. Our society is illuminated by the spiritual insights of the Hebrew prophets. America and Israel have a common love of human freedom, and they have a common faith in a democratic way of life. I am making a collection of the things my opponents have found me to be, and, when this election is over, I am going to open a museum and put them on display. When things haven't gone well for you, call in a secretary or a staff man and chew him out. You will sleep better and they will appreciate the attention. It is the genius of our Constitution that under its shelter of enduring institutions and rooted principles there is ample room for the rich fertility of American political invention. It is always a strain when people are being killed. I don't think anybody has held this job who hasn't felt personally responsible for those being killed. This is a moment that I deeply wish my parents could have lived to share. My father would have enjoyed what you have so generously said of me, and my mother would have believed it. You've got to work things out in the cloakroom, and when you've got them worked out, you can debate a little before you vote. Jack was out kissing babies while I was out passing bills. Someone had to tend the store. They call upon us to supply American boys to do the job that Asian boys should do. It is important that the United States remain a two-party system. I'm a fellow who likes small parties, and the Republican Party can't be too small to suit me. I believe the destiny of your generation, and your nation, is a rendezvous with excellence. One lesson you better learn if you want to be in politics is that you never go out on a golf course and beat the president. I report to you that our country is challenged at home and abroad, that it is our will that is being tried and not our strength, our sense of purpose and not our ability to achieve a better America. The moon and other celestial bodies should be free for exploration and use by all countries. No country should be permitted to advance a claim of sovereignty. We believe, that is, you and I, that education is not an expense. We believe it is an investment. Democrats legislate, Republicans investigate. He was the one person I ever knew, anywhere, who was never afraid. I wrote once every 2 or 3 weeks for about a year, and then about a year ago, I got an email. Jerry Ford is so dumb that he can't fart and chew gum at the same time. Boys, I may not know much, but I know chicken shit from chicken salad. There's so much that we have yet to do, the hunger in the world, the sickness in the world, the poverty in the world. We must apply some of the great talents that we've applied to space to all these problems, and get them done. And get them done in the spirit of what's the greatest good for the greatest number. The world has narrowed to a neighborhood before it has broadened to a brotherhood. For Bird, still a girl of principles, ideals and refinement, from her admirer, Lyndon. It's probably better to have him inside the tent pissing out, than outside the tent pissing in. I hope your mind's not as empty as that desk. The guns and bombs, the rockets and the warships, all are symbols of human failure. A third place to build the great society is in the classrooms of America. There your children's lives will be shaped. Our society will not be great until every young mind is set free to scan the farthest reaches of thought and imagination. We are still far from that goal. We decided that our first job was to help the schools serving the children from the very lowest income groups. Those families constitute the number one burden in this nation on the school systems. We know that they cannot bear their share of the taxes to help pay for their education. And unless those children get a good education, we know that they become dropouts and they become delinquents and they become tax eaters instead of taxpayers. We know that they will join the unemployed. That is why we put top priority on breaking the vicious cycle that today threatens the future of 5 million children in this great land of opportunity which we talk about so much. Most of all, we need an education which will create an educated mind. This is a mind not simply a repository of information and skills, but a mind that is a source of creative skepticism, characterized by a willingness to challenge old assumptions and to be challenged, a spaciousness of outlook, and convictions that are deeply held, but which new facts and new experiences can always modify. It means an educational system which does not simply equip the students to adjust to society, but which enables the student to challenge and to modify, and at times reject, if necessary, the received wisdom of his elders. For it was only after I could become president of this country that I could really see in all its hopeful and troubling implications just how much the hopes of our citizens, and the security of our nation and the real strength of our democracy depended upon the learning and the understanding of our people. We have always believed that our people can stand on no higher ground than the school ground, or can enter any more hopeful room than the classroom. We blend time and faith and knowledge in our schools, not only to create educated citizens, but also to shape the destiny of this great republic. This Congress did more to uplift education, more to attack disease in this country and around the world, and more to conquer poverty than any other session in all American history, and what more worthy achievements could any person want to have? For it was the Congress that was more true than any other Congress to Thomas Jefferson's belief that the care of human life and happiness is the first and only legitimate objective of good government. In the years since then, those four freedoms, freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear, have stood as a summary of our aspirations for the American Republic and for the world. And Americans have always stood ready to pay the cost and energy and treasure which are needed to make those goals a reality. Today, wealthier, more powerful and more able than ever before in our history, our nation can declare another essential freedom. The experts spent a great deal of time and study working out a formula which would be fair to every state and fair to every county and fair to every child, and would put the education dollar where that dollar is needed most, now. Way back last summer I asked some of the most outstanding educational minds in this nation to tackle this problem. I gave them a single instruction: find out how we can best invest each education dollar so that it will do the most good. Your support and the support of every leading education group proves that they did their job better than I had hoped, because for the first time we have succeeded in finding goals which unite us rather than divide us. I don't think that I need to tell you how important to the outcome of that race is the education legislation that is now before the Congress. I hope that it is important enough that most of you have studied it in detail. I hope that you understand that it represents the very best thinking that the leading educators of this country can produce. In many places, classrooms are overcrowded and curricula are outdated. Most of our qualified teachers are underpaid, and many of our paid teachers are unqualified. So we must give every child a place to sit and a teacher to learn from. Poverty must not be a bar to learning, and learning must offer an escape from poverty. But more classrooms and more teachers are not enough. We must seek an educational system which grows in excellence as it grows in size. This means better training for our teachers. It means preparing youth to enjoy their hours of leisure as well as their hours of labor. It means exploring new techniques of teaching, to find new ways to stimulate the love of learning and the capacity for creation. In addition to our existing programs, I will recommend a new program for schools and students with a first-year authorization of $1,500 million. It will help at every state along the road to learning. For the preschool years we will help needy children become aware of the excitement of learning. For the primary and secondary school years, we will aid public schools serving low-income families and assist students in both public and private schools. For the college years we will provide scholarships to high school students of the greatest promise and greatest need and guarantee low-interest loans to students continuing their college studies. New laboratories and centers will help our schools lift their standards of excellence and explore new methods of teaching. These centers will provide special training for those who need and deserve special treatment. In 1838, Mirabeau B. Lamar, the second President of the Republic of Texas and the father of Texas education, declared, "The cultivated mind is the guardian genius of democracy. It is the only dictator that free man acknowledges. It is the only security that free man desires." Education is the guardian genius of our democracy. Nothing really means more to our future, not our military defenses, not our missiles or our bombers, not our production economy, not even our democratic system of government. For all of these are worthless if we lack the brain power to support and sustain them. The job, of course, will never be finished. For a nation, as for an individual, education is a perpetually unfinished journey, a continuing process of discovery. History may well record that we served liberty and saved freedom when we undertook a crash program in the field of education. I hope this bill is only the forerunner of better things to come. First, this law, the National Defense Education Act, ended years and years of debate about one controversial question: shall the federal government, with all its massive resources, get directly involved in aiding American education? The answer this law gave was a loud yes. And thus we paved the way for a new era of support for education in America. This law, in fact, helped make possible more than 50 new education laws passed in my administration. As it was 189 years ago, so today the cause of America is a revolutionary cause. And I am proud this morning to salute you as fellow revolutionaries. Neither you nor I are willing to accept the tyranny of poverty, nor the dictatorship of ignorance, nor the despotism of ill health, nor the oppression of bias and prejudice and bigotry. We want change. We want progress. We want it both abroad and at home, and we aim to get it. I don't believe in labels. I want to do the best I can, all the time. I want to be progressive without getting both feet off the ground at the same time. I want to be prudent without having my mind closed to anything that is new or different. I have often said that I was proud that I was a free man first and an American second, and a public servant third and a Democrat fourth, in that order. And I guess as a Democrat, if I had to place a label on myself, I would want to be a progressive who is prudent. There is nothing that exasperates people more than a display of superior ability or brilliance in conversation. They seem pleased at the time, but their envy makes them curse the conversationalist in their heart. The poor suffer twice at the rioter's hands. First, his destructive fury scars their neighborhood. Second, the atmosphere of accommodation and consent is changed to one of hostility and resentment. Every president wants to do right. Not merely a nation but a nation of nations. There are some, I know, who see beautification as a frill, as an extra, or as something that is luxurious enough to postpone. Well, they make me impatient because I am convinced that beauty and order in our environment are not frills. I am convinced that they are urgent necessities because they will determine whether our grandchildren can live in a decent land or whether they will be surrounded by glittering junk heaps. We will not have served the water needs of Americans if we meet only the requirements of today's population. A prudent nation must look ahead and plan for tomorrow. Every man of any education would rather be called a rascal than accused of deficiency in the graces. In Asia we face an ambitious and aggressive China, but we have the will and we have the strength to help our Asian friends resist that ambition. Sometimes our folks get a little impatient. Sometimes they rattle their rockets some, and they bluff about their bombs. But we are not about to send American boys 9 or 10,000 miles away from home to do what Asian boys ought to be doing for themselves. In the great society, work shall be an outlet for man's interests and desires. Each individual shall have full opportunity to use his capacities in employment which satisfies personally and contributes generally to the quality of the nation's life. I believe that the essence of government lies with unceasing concern for the welfare and dignity and decency and innate integrity of life for every individual. I don't like to say this and wish I didn't have to add these words to make it clear, but I will regardless of color, creed, ancestry, sex, or age. Second, this law has become a special symbol of our nation's most important purpose, to fulfill the individual, his freedom, his happiness, his promise. There is no issue of states' rights or national rights. There is only the struggle for human rights. Watch their hands, watch their eyes. Read eyes. No matter what a man is saying to you, it's not as important as what you can read in his eyes. The most important thing a man has to tell you is what he's not telling you. The most important thing he has to say is what he's trying not to say. We must not only protect the countryside and save it from destruction, we must restore what has been destroyed and salvage the beauty and charm of our cities. Once our natural splendor is destroyed, it can never be recaptured. And once man can no longer walk with beauty or wonder at nature, his spirit will wither and his sustenance be wasted. If I could get one message to you it would be this: the future of this country and the welfare of the free world depends upon our success in space. There is no room in this country for any but a fully cooperative, urgently motivated all-out effort toward space leadership. No one person, no one company, no one government agency has a monopoly on the competence, the missions, or the requirements for the space program. It's too bad, but the way American people are, now that they have all this capability, instead of taking advantage of it, they'll probably just piss it all away. You never want to give a man a present when he's feeling good. You want to do it when he's down. A compassionate government keeps faith with the trust of the people and cherishes the future of their children. Through compassion for the plight of one individual, government fulfills its purpose as the servant of all the people. There are two kinds of speeches: the Mother Hubbard speech, which, like the garment, covers everything but touches nothing, and the French bathing suit speech, which covers only the essential points. In modern warfare there are no victors, there are only survivors. Organized crime constitutes nothing less than a guerrilla war against society. I may not worry as much as Prime Minister Eshkol does about Israel, but I worry as deeply. The American Indian, once proud and free, is torn now between white and tribal values, between the politics and language of the white man and his own historic culture. His problems, sharpened by years of defeat and exploitation, neglect and inadequate effort, will take many years to overcome. Every child must be encouraged to get as much education as he has the ability to take. We want this not only for his sake, but for the future of our nation's sake. Nothing matters more to the future of our country, not our military preparedness, for armed might is worthless if we lack the brainpower to build world peace. Not our productive economy, for we cannot sustain growth without trained manpower, not our democratic system of government, for freedom is fragile if citizens are ignorant. He that in the latter part of his life too strictly inquires what he has done, can very seldom receive from his own heart such an account as will give him satisfaction. A few years make such havoc in human generations that we soon see ourselves deprived of those with whom we entered the world, and whom the participation of pleasures or fatigues had endeared to our remembrance. Such is the condition of life that something is always wanting to happiness. In youth we have warm hopes, which are soon blasted by rashness and negligence, and great designs which are defeated by inexperience. In age, we have knowledge and prudence, without spirit to exert, or motives to prompt them, we are able to plan schemes, and regulate measures, but have not time remaining to bring them to completion. There can no longer be anyone too poor to vote. So here is the great society. It's the time, and it's going to be soon, when nobody in this country is poor. The hungry world cannot be fed until and unless the growth of its resources and the growth of its population come into balance. Each man and woman and each nation must make decisions of conscience and policy in the face of this great problem. Nothing comes free. Nothing. Not even good, especially not good. I believe, with abiding conviction, that this people nurtured by their deep faith, tutored by their hard lessons, moved by their high aspirations have the will to meet the trials that these times impose. If a single act of folly was more responsible for this explosion than any other, it was the arbitrary and dangerous announced decision that the Straits of Tiran would be closed. The right of innocent, maritime passage must be preserved for all nations. He's a nice guy, but he played too much football with his helmet off. Doing the right thing is not the problem. Knowing what the right thing is, that's the challenge. The United States and Israel share many common objectives, chief of which is the building of a better world in which every nation can develop its resources and develop them in freedom and peace. You ain't learnin' nothin' when you're talkin'. I will not seek, and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president. Evil acts of the past are never rectified by evil acts of the present. All I have I would have given gladly not to be standing here today. Come now. Let us reason together. We can and should have an abundance of trails for walking, cycling, and horseback riding, in and close to our cities. In the backcountry we need to copy the Great Appalachian Trail in all parts of America. The American people have a right to air that they and their children can breathe without fear. Europe has been at peace since 1945, but it is a restless peace that's shadowed by the threat of violence. Europe is partitioned. An unnatural line runs through the heart of a very great and a very proud nation, Germany. History warns us that until this harsh division has been resolved, peace in Europe will never be secure. We must turn to one of the great unfinished tasks of our generation, and that unfinished task is making Europe whole again. If you're in politics and you can't tell when you walk into a room who's for you and who's against you, then you're in the wrong line of work. Ambition is an uncomfortable companion many times. He creates a discontent with present surroundings and achievements. He is never satisfied but always pressing forward to better things in the future. Restless, energetic, purposeful, it is ambition that makes of the creature a real man. Control of space means control of the world. The Roman Empire controlled the world because it could build roads. The British Empire was dominant because it had ships. In the air age we were powerful because we had airplanes. Now the communists have established a foothold in outer space. Men who have worked together to reach the stars are not likely to descend together into the depths of war and desolation. President can't swim. We still seek no wider war. Our objective in South Vietnam has never been the annihilation of the enemy. It has been to bring about a recognition in Hanoi that its objective, taking over the South by force, could not be achieved. Above the pyramid on the Great Seal of the United States it says in Latin, "God has favored our undertaking." God will not favor everything that we do. It is rather our duty to divine His will. There is no excuse, and we should call a spade for chemical companies and oil refineries using our major rivers as pipelines for toxic waste. There is no excuse for communities to use other people's rivers as a dump for their raw sewage. It's the price of leadership to do the thing you believe has to be done at the time it must be done. A clear stream, a long horizon, a forest wilderness, an open sky, these are man's most ancient possessions. In a modern society, they are his most priceless. Conservation is ethically sound. It is rooted in our love of the land, our respect for the rights of others, our devotion to the rule of law. Hug your friends tight, but your enemies tighter. Hug 'em so tight they can, wiggle. There is something more important than any ultimate weapon. That is the ultimate position, the position of total control over Earth that lies somewhere out in space. That is the distant future, though not so distant as we may have thought. Whoever gains that ultimate position gains control, total control, over the Earth, for the purposes of tyranny or for the service of freedom. In the last few decades, entire new categories of waste have come to plague and menace the American scene. Pollution is growing at a rapid rate. Pollution destroys beauty and menaces health. It cuts down on efficiency, reduces property values, and raises taxes. Almost all these wastes and pollutions are the result of activities carried on for the benefit of man. A prime national goal must be an environment that is pleasing to the senses and healthy to live in. Our government is already doing much in this field. We have made significant progress. But more must be done. It is not uncommon for those who at their first entrance into the world were distinguished for attainments or abilities, to disappoint the hopes which they had raised, and to end in neglect and obscurity that life which they began in honor. To the long catalogue of the inconveniences of old age, which moral and satirical writers have so copiously displayed, may be often added the loss of fame. Emancipation was a proclamation, but not a fact. Once we considered education a public expense, we know now that it is a public investment. Not now, or not there, or too much, or not at all. A perpetual conflict with natural desires seems to be the lot of our present state. In youth we require something of the tardiness and frigidity of age, and in age we must labor to recall the fire and impetuosity of youth. In youth we must learn to respect, and in age to enjoy. I'll have those N*****Jers voting Democratic for the next 200 years. Americans have always built for the future. That is why we established land-grant colleges and passed the Homestead Act to open our western lands more than 100 years ago. Every funeral may justly be considered as a summons to prepare for that state into which it shows us that we must sometime enter, and the summons is more loud and piercing as the event of which it warns us is at less distance. To neglect at any time preparation for death is to sleep on our post at a siege, but to omit it in old age is to sleep at an attack. In a nation of millions and a world of billions, the individual is still the first and basic agent of change. My most fervent prayer is to be a president who can make it possible for every boy in this land to grow to manhood by loving his country instead of dying for it. Reporters are like puppets. They simply respond to the pull of the most powerful strings. If we quit Vietnam, tomorrow we'll be fighting in Hawaii, and next week we'll have to fight in San Francisco. The heart, is supposed in popular language to be the seat sometimes of courage, sometimes of affection, sometimes of honesty, or baseness. Law is the great civilizing machinery. It liberates the desire to build and subdues the desire to destroy. At times history and fate meet at a single time in a single place to shape a turning point in man's unending search for freedom. For the individual, education is the path to achievement and fulfillment. For the nation, it is a path to a society that is not only free but civilized, and for the world, it is the path to peace, for it is education that places reason over force. I shall never forget the faces of the boys and the girls in that little Wellhausen Mexican school, and I remember even yet the pain of realizing and knowing then that college was closed to practically every one of those children because they were too poor. And I think it was then that I made up my mind that this nation could never rest while the door to knowledge remained closed to any American. I won't have you electioneering on my doorstep. Every time you get in trouble in Parliament you run over here with your shirt tail hanging out. Never make a speech at a country dance or a football game. 100 years ago, the slave was freed. 100 years later, the Negro remains in bondage to the color of his skin. If we fail now, then we will have forgotten in abundance what we learned in hardship. That democracy rests on faith, freedom asks more than it gives, and the judgment of God is harshest on those who are most favored. The great society is a place where every child can find knowledge to enrich his mind and enlarge his talents. Air pollution is a threat to health, especially of older persons. It contributes significantly to the rising rates of chronic respiratory ailments. It stains our cities and towns with ugliness, soiling and corroding whatever it touches. Its damage extends to our forests and farmlands as well. The economic toll for our neglect amounts to billions of dollars each year. I pray we are still a young and courageous nation, that we have not grown so old and so fat and so prosperous that all we can think about is to sit back with our arms around our money bags. If we choose to do that, I have no doubt that the smoldering fires will burst into flame and consume us, dollars and all. There is no constitutional issue here. The command of the Constitution is plain. There is no moral issue. It is wrong, deadly wrong, to deny any of your fellow Americans the right to vote in this country. There is no issue of states' rights or national rights. There is only the struggle for human rights. If we must disagree, let's disagree without being disagreeable. Every citizen will be able, in his productive years when he is earning, to insure himself against the ravages of illness in his old age. I hear the headlines on the radio, see them on TV and read them in the paper. When I hear from the men out there, I sometimes don't believe they are talking about the same situation. If one little old general in shirt sleeves can take Saigon, think about 200 million Chinese coming down those trails. No sir, I don't want to fight them. Our understanding of how to live with one another is still far behind our knowledge of how to destroy one another. Nothing so challenges the American spirit as tackling the biggest job on earth. Americans are stimulated by the big job, the Panama Canal, Boulder Dam, Grand Coulee, Lower Colorado River developments, the tallest building in the world, the mightiest battleship. 4. That's what I want you to remember. If you don't get your idea across in the first 4 minutes, you won't do it. 4 sentences to a paragraph. 4 letters to a word. The most important words in the English language all have 4 letters. Home, love, food, land, peace. That I know peace has 5 letters, but any damn fool knows it should have 4. When the family collapses, it is the children that are usually damaged. When it happens on a massive scale, the community itself is crippled. The family is the cornerstone of our society. The classroom, not the trench, is the frontier of freedom now and forevermore. The test before us as a people is not whether our commitments match our will and our courage, but whether we have the will and courage to match our commitments. Every night before I turn out the lights to sleep, I ask myself this question: have I done everything that I can? Have I done enough? Scarcely any law of our Redeemer is more openly transgressed, or more industriously evaded, than that by which he commands his followers to forgive injuries. Samuel. If you're not listening, you're not learning. Books and ideas are the most effective weapons against intolerance and ignorance. The thing I would like to do most is to find somehow to bring peace to the world. It has eluded me. All that Hubert needs over there is a gal to answer the phone and a pencil with an eraser on it. America has not always been kind to its artists and scholars. Somehow the scientists always seem to get the penthouse while the arts and humanities get the basement. I want real loyalty. I want someone who will kiss my ass in Macy's window, and say it smells like roses. I want every family in America to have a carpet on the floor and a picture on the wall. After bread, you've got to have a picture on the wall. I do not find it easy to send the flower of our youth, our finest young men, into battle. So, I would appeal to my fellow Americans by saying, the only real road to progress for free people is through the process of law, and that is the road that America will travel. War is always the same. It is young men dying in the fullness of their promise. It is trying to kill a man that you do not even know well enough to hate. Therefore, to know war is to know that there is still madness in the world. I believe that the country weekly acts as a form of social cement in holding the community together. This generation has altered the composition of the atmosphere on a global scale through radioactive materials and a steady increase in carbon dioxide from the burning of fossil fuels. Entire regional airsheds, crop plant environments, and river basins are heavy with noxious materials. Motor vehicles and home heating plants, municipal dumps, and factories continually hurl pollutants into the air we breathe. Each day almost 50,000 tons of unpleasant, and sometimes poisonous, sulfur dioxide are added to the atmosphere, and our automobiles produce almost 300,000 tons of other pollutants. Human history, H.G. Wells once wrote, becomes more and more a race between education and catastrophe. You and I cannot be indifferent to the outcome of that race. We care deeply about the winner. Because we do care so deeply about the winner, that is why we are all in the East Room of the White House today. Of course, I may go into a strange bedroom every now and then that I don't want you to write about, but otherwise you can write everything. John ain't been worth a damn since he started wearing $300 suits. The fifth freedom is freedom from ignorance. All men are created equal. Government by consent of the governed. Give me liberty or give me death. And those are not just clever words, and those are not just empty theories. The crotch, down where your nuts hang, is always a little too tight. Never miss an opportunity to say a word of congratulation upon anyone's achievement. We need to remember that the separation of church and state must never mean the separation of religious values from the lives of public servants. If we who serve free men today are to differ from the tyrants of this age, we must balance the powers in our hands with God in our hearts. You have your own difficulties. We watch, with friendly confidence in your capacity to merge differences in the grand dream of Canadian design. We Americans know, although others appear to forget, the risk of spreading conflict. We still seek no wider war. The time has also come to identify and preserve free-flowing stretches of our great rivers before growth and development make the beauty of the unspoiled waterway a memory. When a person finds themselves predisposed to complaining about how little they are regarded by others, let them reflect how little they have contributed to the happiness of others. Nothing is more unjust, however common, than to charge with hypocrisy him that expresses zeal for those virtues which he neglects to practice, since he may be sincerely convinced of the advantages of conquering his passions without having yet obtained the victory, as a man may be confident of the advantages of a voyage or a journey, without having courage or industry to undertake it, and may honestly recommend to others those attempts which he neglects himself. The best way to begin disarming is to begin, and the United States is ready to conclude firm agreements in these areas and to consider any other reasonable proposal. You know, there is no one in the world I would rather sleep with than Yuki. There's something special for everyone to do. Remember, no experience is a bad experience unless you gain nothing from it. This nation, this generation, in this hour has man's first chance to build a great society, a place where the meaning of man's life matches the marvels of man's labor. An unspoiled river is a very rare thing in this nation today. Their flow and vitality have been harnessed by dams, and too often they have been turned into open sewers by communities and by industries. It makes us all very fearful that all rivers will go this way unless somebody acts now to try to balance our river development. No man should think that peace comes easily. Peace does not come by merely wanting it, or shouting for it, or marching down Main Street for it. Peace is built brick by brick, mortared by the stubborn effort and the total energy and imagination of able and dedicated men. And it is built in the living faith that, in the end, man can and will master his own destiny. Our partnership has been built on 4 pillars. The first pillar is peace. The second pillar is freedom. The third pillar is respect. The fourth pillar is cooperation. No nation in the world has had greater fortune than mine in sharing a continent with the people and the nation of Canada. We of the United States consider ourselves blessed. We have much to give thanks for. But the gift of Providence we cherish most is that we were given as our neighbors on this wonderful continent the people and the nation of Canada. In the decline of life, shame and grief are of short duration, whether it be that we bear easily what we have borne long, or that, finding ourselves in age less regarded, we less regard others, or that we look with slight regard upon afflictions to which we know that the hand of death is about to put an end. I believe in the American tradition of separation of church and state, which is expressed in the First Amendment to the Constitution. By my office, and by personal conviction, I am sworn to uphold that tradition. That though they may refuse to grow wise, they must inevitably grow old, that the proper solaces of age are not music and compliments, but wisdom and devotion, that those who are so unwilling to quit the world will soon be driven from it, and that it is therefore in their interest to retire while there yet remain a few hours of nobler employments. He's got great vision. If he can get outside, he can take it all the way. That's what we were worried about. You do not take a man who for years has been hobbled by chains, liberate him, bring him to the starting line of a race, saying you are free to compete with all the others, and still justly believe you have been completely fair. We seek not just freedom but opportunity, not just equality as a right and a theory, but equality as a fact and as a result. Many have no happier moments than those that they pass in solitude, abandoned to their own imagination, which sometimes puts scepters in their hands or mitres on their heads, shifts the scene of pleasure with endless variety, bids all the forms of beauty sparkle before them, and gluts them with every change of visionary luxury. If the purpose of lamentation be to excite pity, it is surely superfluous for age and weakness to tell their plaintive stories, for pity presupposes sympathy, and a little attention will show them that those who do not feel pain seldom think that it is felt. I am a compromiser and maneuverer. I try to get something. That's the way our system works. It is the excitement of becoming, always becoming, trying, probing, falling, resting, and trying again, but always trying and always gaining. Nothing is more despicable than the old age of a passionate man. When the vigor of youth fails him, and his amusements pall with frequent repetition, his occasional rage sinks by decay of strength into peevishness, that peevishness, for want of novelty and variety, becomes habitual, the world falls off from around him, and he is left, as Homer expresses it, to devour his own heart in solitude and contempt. I don't have any handicap. I am all handicap. The United States stands by its friends. Israel is one of its friends. Peace can be based only on agreement between the parties, and agreement can be achieved only through negotiations between them. The United States will not impose the terms of peace. The United States is prepared to supply military equipment necessary to support the efforts of friendly governments, like Israel's, to defend the safety of their people. I am afraid that health begins, after 70, and often long before, to have a meaning different from that which it had at 30. But it is culpable to murmur at the established order of the creation, as it is vain to oppose it. He that lives must grow old, and he that would rather grow old than die, has God to thank for the infirmities of old age. I know, from personal experience, that abiding values and abundant visions are learned in the homes of our people. The law cannot save those who deny it, but neither can the law serve any who do not use it. The history of injustice and inequality is a history of disuse of the law. Of those to whom much is given, much is asked. I cannot say, and no man could say, that no more will be asked of us. Government is best which is closest to the people. Yet that belief is betrayed by those state and local officials who engage in denying the right of citizens to vote. Their actions serve only to assure that their state governments and local governments shall be remote from the people, least representative of the people's will and least responsive to the people's wishes. A good president does with executive power what Pablo Picasso did with paint. He takes bills into new and slightly discomfiting territory. He puts extra eyes on policies. He moves the mouth of the Supreme Court from where it should be to where it must be. Throughout my entire public career I have followed the personal philosophy that I am a free man, an American, a public servant, and a member of my party. In that order always and only. For every generation, there is a destiny. For some, history decides. For this generation, the choice must be our own. Our destiny in the midst of change will rest on the unchanged character of our people, and on their faith. Every American citizen must have an equal right to vote. There is no reason which can excuse the denial of that right. There is no duty which weighs more heavily on us than the duty we have to ensure that right. As we maintain the vigil of peace, we must remember that justice is a vigil. A vigil we must keep in our own streets and schools and among the lives of all our people so that those who died here on their native soil shall not have died in vain. The purposeful many need not and will not bow to the willful few. We cannot have government for all the people until we first make certain it is government of and by all the people. Every man, everywhere, should be free to develop his talents to their full potential, unhampered by arbitrary barriers of race or birth or income. It is a truism that education is no longer a luxury. Education in this day and age is a necessity. Life is never easy. There is work to be done and obligations to be met, obligations to truth, to justice, and to liberty. Where legitimate opportunities are closed, illegitimate opportunities are seized. Whatever opens opportunity and hope will help to prevent crime and foster responsibility. Of all the problems of conservation, none is more urgent at the polluted air which endangers the American people. We have been fortunate so far. But we have seen that when winds fail to blow, the concentrations of poisonous clouds over our cities can become perilous. The debris of civilization litters the landscapes and spoils the beaches. Conservation's concerns now is not only for man's enjoyment but for man's survival. An unfolding technology has increased our economic strength and added to the convenience of our lives. But that same technology we know now carries danger with it. From the great smokestacks of industry and from the exhausts of motors and machines, 130 million tons of soot, carbon and grime settle over the people and shroud the nation's cities each year. From towns, factories, and stockyards, wastes pollute our rivers and streams, endangering the waters we drink and use. The time has come when we cannot be so careless. Unless we do better, We may suffer through a stark emergency of the environment. We may create a hostile world, a world to bruise ourselves against, a world of sprawling cities, unplanned or badly planned, a world whose water is full of sludge, whose winds are full of soot, a world whose landscape has been totally neglected, stripped, marred, and wasted. All of this need not happen if we choose well, and particularly if we plan well and if we act well. We do not want an expanding struggle with consequences that no one can perceive, nor will we bluster or bully or flaunt our power. But we will not surrender and we will not retreat, for behind our American pledge lies the determination and resources, I believe, of all of the American nation. Peace does not come just because we wish for it. Peace must be fought for. It must be built stone by stone. The American West is just arriving at the threshold of its greatness and growth. Where the West of yesterday is glamorized in our fiction, the future of the American West now is both fabulous and factual. Democracy is a constant tension between truth and half-truth and, in the arsenal of truth, there is no greater weapon than fact. Now we may have more preachers out there than we have drinkers. But a fellow told me a story one time about a man down in Kentucky where they make bourbon. And he said you can take a jigger or 2 jiggers and get by all right. But if you try to take the whole bottle, why, you have lost what you started with. So don't try to take it too quick. And don't try to do all of it at once. I don't do much promising. I tell what my goals are and then I try to wrap it up and put a blue ribbon on it and get it delivered. We say put the coonskin on the wall. All of us realize that war requires action. What is sometimes harder for us to realize is that peace and neutrality also require action. All the historians are Harvard people. It just isn't fair. Poor old Hoover from West Branch, Iowa, had no chance with that crowd, nor did Andrew Jackson from Tennessee. Nor does Lyndon Johnson from Stonewall, Texas. It just isn't fair. We live amid falling taboos. In our crowded little hour of history, we have seen how the prejudice of religion no longer can bar the way to the White House. Some of you may live to see the day when the prejudice of sex no longer places the presidency beyond the reach of a greatly gifted American lady. Long before then, I hope you will see a woman member of the Supreme Court of the United States. In Congress and in our state legislatures we need more women to bring their sensitive experience to the shaping of our decisions. Mr. Speaker, at a time when the nation is again confronted with necessity for calling its young men into service in the interests of national security, I cannot see the wisdom of denying our young women the opportunity to serve their country. I am persuaded that the people of the world have no grievances, one against the other. The hopes and desires of a man who tills the soil are about the same whether he lives on the banks of the Colorado or on the banks of the Danube. I taught school in the early days of my manhood and I think I know something about mothers. There is a thread of aspiration that runs strong in them. It is the fiber that has formed the most unselfish creatures who inhabit this earth. They want 3 things only: for their children to be fed, to be healthy, and to make the most of themselves. Sometimes among our more sophisticated, self-styled intellectuals, and I say self-styled advisedly, the real intellectual, I am not sure would ever feel this way. Some of them are more concerned with appearance than they are with achievement. They are more concerned with style than they are with mortar, brick and concrete. They are more concerned with trivia and the superficial than they are with the things that have really built America. The final conquest of poverty is within our grasp. We have heard all of our lives how, after the Civil War was over, the South went back to straighten itself out and make a living again. It was for many years a voiceless part of the government. The balance of power moved away from it to the North and the East. The problems of the North and the East became the big problem of the country, and nobody paid much attention to the economic unbalance the South had left as its only choice. A President Roosevelt comes only once in a century. I believe God knew and does know of the need of the world at this moment. I don't believe President Roosevelt is an accident in time, or that it is an accident that he is president for a third time. I believe that Franklin D. Roosevelt truly is the voice of liberty in the world. But, most of all, the Great Society is not a safe harbor, a resting place, a final objective, a finished work. It is a challenge constantly renewed, beckoning us toward a destiny where the meaning of our lives matches the marvelous products of our labor. A president must call on many persons, some to man the ramparts and to watch the far-away, distant posts, others to lead us in science, medicine, education and social progress here at home. Boys, it is just like the Alamo. Somebody should have, by God, helped those Texans. I'm going to Vietnam. I wake up 5 a.m. some mornings and hear the planes coming in at National Airport, and I think they are bombing me. I'm willin' for any solution, religious, political. I'm not going to keep off errand to negotiate so much because they turn us down each time. It indicates a weakness on our part. Liberty is not enough. I am proud to be a member of a party that opens its doors to all men and closes its hearts to none. In my state, on the basis of the separate but equal doctrine, we have made enormous strides over the years in the education of both races. Personally, I think it would have been sounder judgment to allow that progress to continue through the process of natural evolution. However, there is no point crying about spilt milk. As the House is designed to provide a reflection of the mood of the moment, the Senate is meant to reflect the continuity of the past, to preserve the delicate balance of justice between the majority's whims and the minority's rights. We do this in order to slow down aggression. We do this to increase the confidence of the brave people of South Vietnam who have bravely borne this brutal battle for so many years with so many casualties. And we do this to convince the leaders of North Vietnam and all who seek to share their conquest of a simple fact: we will not be defeated. We will not grow tired. We will not withdraw either openly or under the cloak of a meaningless agreement. Jerry Ford is so dumb he can't walk and chew gum at the same time. He's a nice fellow, but he spent too much time playing football without a helmet. Today our problem is not making miracles, but managing them. I'm the only president you've got. The Great Society is a place where men are more concerned with the quality of their goods than with the quantity of their goods. If we become two people, the suburban affluent and the urban poor, each filled with mistrust and fear of the other, then we shall effectively cripple each generation to come. The Air Force comes in every morning and says, "Bomb, bomb, bomb." And then the State Department comes in and says, "Not now," or "Not there," or "Too much," or "Not at all." The future holds little hope for any government, or the present holds no hope for the people. It now seems to be quite a thing to pull down the mighty from their seats and roll them in the mire. This practice deserves pronounced condemnation. Hero worship is a tremendous force in uplifting and strengthening humanity. Let us have our heroes. Let us continue to believe that some have been truly great. But we have not used our waters well. Our major rivers are defiled by noxious debris. Pollutants from cities and industries kill the fish in our streams. Many waterways are covered with oil slicks and contain growths of algae that destroy productive life and make the water unfit for recreation. Polluted water. No swimming has become a familiar sign on too many beaches and rivers. A lake that has served many generations of men now can be destroyed by man in less than one generation. No one has the right to use America's rivers and America's waterways, that belong to all the people, as a sewer. The banks of a river may belong to one man or one industry or one state, but the waters which flow between the banks should belong to all the people. Freedom is not enough. We don't propose to sit here in our rocking chair with our hands folded and let the communists set up any government in the Western Hemisphere. If there is one word that describes our form of society in America, it may be the word voluntary. To hunger for use and to go unused is the worst hunger of all. Every gift contains a danger. Whatever gift we have, we are compelled to express. And if the expression of that gift is blocked, distorted, or merely allowed to languish, then the gift turns against us, and we suffer. I'm a powerful SOB, you know that. Curtis LeMay wants to bomb Hanoi and Haiphong. You know how he likes to go around bombing. The exercise of power in this century has meant for all of us in the United States not arrogance, but agony. This Civil Rights Act is a challenge to all of us to go to work in our communities and our states, in our homes and in our hearts. to eliminate the last vestiges of injustice in our beloved country. So tonight I urge every public official, every religious leader, every business and professional man, every working man, every housewife, I urge every American, to join in this effort to bring justice and hope to all our people, and to bring peace to our land. We preach the virtues of democracy abroad. We must practice its duties here at home. Voting is the first duty of democracy. Poverty has many roots, but the tap root is ignorance. Every man should know that his conversations, his correspondence, and his personal life are private. Success only feeds the appetite of aggression. Light at the end of the tunnel. We don't even have a tunnel, we don't even know where the tunnel is. Voting is the first duty of democracy. It is very seldom that anyone is in prison for an ordinary crime unless early in life he entered a path that almost invariably led to the prison gate. Most of the inmates are the children of the poor. In many instances they are either orphans or half-orphans. Their homes were the streets and byways of big cities, and their paths naturally and inevitably took them to their final fate. Effective law enforcement and social justice must be pursued together, as the foundation of our efforts against crime. Every citizen, regardless of his race, creed, or color, is entitled to equal justice. Each year more than 100,000 high school graduates, with proved ability, do not enter college because they cannot afford it. And if we cannot educate today's youth, what will we do in 1970 when elementary enrollment will be 5 million greater than 1960? And high school enrollment will rise by 5 million. College enrollment will increase by more than 3 million. We are now embarked on another venture to put the American dream to work in meeting the new demands of a new day. Once again we must start where men would improve their society have always known they must begin, with an educational system restudied, reinforced, and revitalized. True poverty does not come from God. In 1,000 unseen ways we have drawn shape and strength from the land. For the first time in our history it is possible to conquer poverty. Extremism is the pursuit of the presidency is an unpardonable vice. Moderation in the affairs of the nation is the highest virtue. In this age when there can be no losers in peace and no victors in war, we must recognize the obligation to match national strength with national restraint. Let us close the springs of racial poison. Let us pray for wise and understanding hearts. Let us lay aside irrelevant differences and make our nation whole. Let no one ever think for a moment that national debate means national division. This is not a jungle war, but a struggle for freedom on every front of human activity. How incredible it is that in this fragile existence we should hate and destroy one another. There are possibilities enough for all who will abandon mastery over others to pursue mastery over nature. There is world enough for all to seek their happiness in their own way. If anybody has any idea of hoarding our silver coins, let me say this. Treasury has a lot of silver on hand, and it will be used to keep the price of silver in line with its value in our present silver coin. There will be no profit in holding them out of circulation for the value of their silver content. A rioter with a Molotov cocktail in his hands is not fighting for civil rights any more than a Klansman with a sheet on his back and mask on his face. They are both more or less what the law declares them, lawbreakers, destroyers of constitutional rights and liberties, and ultimately destroyers of a free America. Any man who's not willing to take half a loaf in a negotiation, well, that man never went to bed hungry. The best fertilizer for a piece of land is the footprints of its owner. We come to reason, not to dominate. We do not seek to have our way, but to find a common way. Knowledge is of two kinds: we know a subject itself, or know where to find it. Republicans simply don't know how to manage the economy. The Secretary of Labor is in charge of finding you a job, the Secretary of the Treasury is in charge of taking half the money you make away from you, and the Attorney General is in charge of suing you for the other half. Free speech, free press, free religion, the right of free assembly, yes, the right of petition, well, they are still radical ideas. Today, 8 million adult Americans, more than the entire population of Michigan, have not finished 5 years of school. Nearly 20 million have not finished 8 years of school. Nearly 54 million, more than 1/4 of all America, have not even finished high school. This right to vote is the basic right without which all others are meaningless. It gives people as individuals, control over their own destinies. A nation that fails to plan intelligently for the development and protection of its precious waters will be condemned to wither because of its short-sightedness. The hard lessons of history are clear, written on the deserted sands and ruins of once proud civilizations. If you let a bully come in your front yard, he'll be on your porch the next day, and the day after that he'll rape your wife in your own bed. At the desk where I sit, I have learned one great truth. The answer for all our national problems, the answer for all the problems of the world, come to a single word. That word is education. The American city should be a collection of communities where every member has a right to belong. It should be a place where every man feels safe on his streets and in the house of his friends. It should be a place where each individual's dignity and self-respect is strengthened by the respect and affection of his neighbors. It should be a place where each of us can find the satisfaction and warmth which comes from being a member of the community of man. This is what man sought at the dawn of civilization. It is what we seek today. Education is the key to opportunity in our society, and the equality of educational opportunity must be the birthright of every citizen. We must open the doors of opportunity. Art is a nation's most precious heritage. For it is in our works of art that we reveal to ourselves and to others the inner vision which guides us as a nation. And where there is no vision, the people perish. If we are to live together in peace, we must come to know each other better. The land flourished because it was fed from so many sources, because it was nourished by so many cultures and traditions and peoples. As man draws nearer to the stars, why should he not also draw nearer to his neighbor? It is happily and kindly provided that in every life there are certain pauses and interruptions, which force consideration upon the careless, and seriousness upon the light, points of time where one course of action ends and another begins. You know when you're milking a cow and you have all that foamy white milk in the bucket and you're just about through. When all of a sudden the cow switches her tail through a pile of manure and slaps it into that foamy white milk. That's Bill Fulbright. In 1790, the nation which had fought a revolution against taxation without representation discovered that some of its citizens weren't much happier about taxation with representation. So far are we generally from thinking what we often say of the shortness of life, that at the time when it is necessarily shortest we form projects which we delay to execute, indulge such expectations as nothing but a long train of events can gratify, and suffer those passions to gain upon us which are only excusable in the prime of life. If you have a mother-in-law with only one eye and she has it in the center of her forehead, don't keep her in the living room. To sustain an environment suitable for man, we must fight on 1,000 battlegrounds. Despite all of our wealth and knowledge, we cannot create a redwood forest, a wild river, or a gleaming seashore. For this is what America is all about. It is the uncrossed desert and the unclimbed ridge. It is the star that is not reached and the harvest that is sleeping in the unplowed ground. No national sovereignty rules in outer space. Those who venture there go as envoys of the entire human race. Their quest, therefore, must be for all mankind, and what they find should belong to all mankind. What convinces is conviction. You aren't learning anything when you're talking. I am going to build the kind of nation that President Roosevelt hoped for, President Truman worked for, and President Kennedy died for. The family is the cornerstone of our society. More than any other force it shapes the attitude, the hopes, the ambitions, and the values of the child. And when the family collapses, it is the children that are usually damaged. When it happens on a massive scale, the community itself is crippled. So, unless we work to strengthen the family, to create conditions under which most parents will stay together, all the rest, schools, playgrounds, and public accidents, and private concern, will never be enough. We can draw lessons from the past, but we cannot live in it. If government is to serve any purpose, it is to do for others what they are unable to do for themselves. Heck, by the time a man scratches his behind, clears his throat, and tells me how smart he is, we've already wasted 15 minutes. International education cannot be the work of one country. It is the responsibility and promise of all nations. It calls for free exchange and full collaboration. The knowledge of our citizens is one treasure which grows only when it is shared. Justice requires us to remember that when any citizen denies his fellow, saying, "His color is not mine," or "His beliefs are strange and different," in that moment he betrays America, though his forebears created this nation. Did you ever think that making a speech on economy is a lot like pissing down your leg? It seems hot to you, but it never does to anyone else. I'm gonna hunker down like a jackrabbit in a dust storm. You know, doing what is right is easy. The problem is knowing what is right. Lincoln was right about not fooling all the people all the time. But Republicans haven't given up trying. We must change to master change. The Organization of American States couldn't pour piss out of a boot if the instructions were written on the heel. Education will not cure all the problems of society, but without it no cure for any problem is possible. Better to have him inside the tent pissing out, than outside the tent pissing in. I'll have those niggers voting Democratic for the next 200 years. Touting his underlying intentions for the Great Society programs, LBJ confided with two like-minded governors on Air Force One. I'll tell you what's at the bottom of it. If you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you.